Hey, Marcus here, sword and sci-fi guy. I want to talk about lightsabers and what martial art that us humans might develop if these things became an actual reality in our non-force sensitive world. But first I want to talk about this. SabersPro was nice enough to send me their dueling model, and I really like it, even though it has a few qualities that aren't perfect. I really like the circumference. It makes it very easy to hold in the hands, and I really like this bit right here. It fits really well in the palm of your hand, and overall it's just really nice to hold, and it's really light, which makes swinging it around an incredibly pleasant experience. The blade is also held in by two screws right here, and there are some blades that are only held in with one screw, and while I haven't had any issues with the blades flying out with those, it's still nice to have the extra security of two screws. And now the slightly less good, it is a one-button design, which does simplify some things, but it also makes some a lot more complicated. It's a learning curve to figure out how to use it, change the sound fonts, change the colors. And speaking of sound fonts, the only issue that I have is the sound isn't the best compared to some other lightsabers. The smooth swing doesn't sound as crisp, and it's just a little bit quieter than some other ones even at full volume. Now it's important to keep in mind that this model is $107, so relatively cheap in terms of dueling lightsabers. So if you want something that's very nice to swing around, this would be great, but if you want something that sounds a little better, then you might want to look at some higher price points. And now a lightsaber-based martial art. What would that look like? A while ago, Corridor Digital came out with one of the coolest realistic lightsaber fights that I've ever seen. Since then, a lot of people have been talking about how we, as regular, non-magical meat humans, would use lightsabers. The most frequent comment that I've seen is that a lightsaber-focused martial art would pull from, of all things, sport fencing. And I think that would be good. All you need to do is touch the target with a tip of the fencing foil in order to get a point, and lightsabers could go through humans like month-old pudding, and you would only need about 3 inches of penetration to reach vital organs. So a fencing thrust would allow you to do that at the furthest distance away from your opponent's blade as possible. I personally think that we would pull a bit from sport fencing for this energy sword kata, but I can think of 2 other martial arts that we'd pull from. One important point is that lightsabers aren't really like swords. They have theoretically infinite edges or 0 edges depending on how you look at it. And this makes edge alignment irrelevant, and they strike more like clubs. Like I said, 2 martial arts come to mind with clubs, Eskrima or Kali for one. It utilizes a number of techniques and strikes that would serve a lightsaber wielder quite well. Pretty sure all of the 12 angles of attack could be utilized with only slight modification. But I want to draw attention to a specific move that would be amazing with the lightsaber. This is the Abanako or hand fan. It's essentially twisting the wrist to hit with the side of a club or energy sword. And this allows you to get some amazing angles and quickly switch from one target on the opponent's body to a completely opposite target on the other side of their body. You can hit the right hip and immediately go to the left shoulder. They parry one strike, you quickly transition to another, the farthest from their blade possible. I think that this would be amazing with the lightsaber. The second martial art is the French kendo combat. I mean, just look at how dynamic this is compared to sport fencing. It looks a lot more like a prequel saber duel than anything else. But I want to point out 2 interesting things. The first is that the legs are valid target, so you get a lot of low lunges. In fencing, hitting the leg is a risk. You aiming down, you lose a bit of range, but a low lunge like that negates it a little bit. With the steel blade, aiming at the feet isn't really the best, even with a crouch, because your opponent could just boop you on the head while you're trying to do that. But energy blades would make it different, and that brings up my second point. Dodging is a lot more common in kendo combat than a lot of other armed martial arts. This is important because the slightest touch counts as a point, and the slightest touch with a lightsaber could result in a grievous injury. So you could definitely boop somebody on the head if they aim at your legs with a lunge. But if you don't get those legs out of there, you might win, but you won't be able to celebrate for too long unless you have a back to tank. And avoiding the opponent by dodging instead of parrying also frees up your weapon. However, parrying would still be a skill that a lightsaber martial art would use. These points that I'm making are just a few things that we'd add to the mixing bowl of a sci-fi martial art. Now, a different sci-fi martial arts topic would be if we'd use swords on spaceships to avoid explosive decompressions that firearms would cause. Here's a quick video where I asked that same question to a real-life rocket scientist, and they gave me some really good information.